Hello, is anybody here? You don't have to be afraid. I'm just here to talk with you. I am a seasoned paranormal investigator with a growing resume. I began investigating the paranormal when I was 16 years old, where I learned the tricks of the trade from a dear friend of mine. Since then, I've been a paranormal tour guide at the Ohio State Reformatory, have been on paranormal teams where I have investigated private homes, and have given presentations on real-life ghost busting. Now, I'm on a quest to explore all realms of the paranormal through expert interviews. I'm Sydney Miller, and this is Not Afraid. Cemeteries have always been places that have fascinated me. I enjoy nothing more than venturing out to local cemeteries by myself and walking around. I find it incredibly peaceful. Sometimes I actually ride my bike to the cemetery on the other side of town for the same reason. Aside from ghost hunting, one of my favorite pastimes is photography. However, 98% of my photos are of cemeteries. I prefer old, decrepit cemeteries over modern ones because of their architecture. Most of the time, I don't know anyone buried in the cemeteries that I explore, but I don't care. I like to explore cemeteries that I have never been to before because I enjoy the thrill of finding old and unique headstones. Famous graves are fun too, but anything spooky looking captures my lens. Tonight, we sit down with Bill Bryan and Tanya Gilroy of Empty Casket Paranormal and the Get Haunted Network.
Bill has been interested in the paranormal since he was a child. He grew up in a haunted house where he saw his first apparition. This experience started him on a quest for answers about the afterlife. He joined his first paranormal team in college. This was just the beginning of his journey into the supernatural. He wanted to learn more about what he once saw as a boy and to find the truth behind the paranormal. As an electromagnetics engineer, Bill is knowledgeable of the physics and workings of much of the equipment. He uses this knowledge to expand the scope of paranormal investigations and keep the investigations grounded within a scientific method. To further his studies of the paranormal, he co-founded Empty Casket Paranormal with Tanya Gilroy in October of 2020. And Tanya are also the co-founders of the Get Haunted Network.
Since toddlerhood, Tanya has been exposed to the supernatural. She was raised with stories of ancient folklore and scary tales that immediately sparked her interest in the paranormal world. Ghosts, goblins, and all things mystical and mysterious have sculpted her beliefs, views, and interest in life, a passion that she proudly has passed down to her two children. Though she maintains a healthy, skeptical view, she doesn't discard the possibility that there are other beings or worlds beyond our own human knowledge. Having had personal experiences herself, she seeks to find answers to what truly causes these unique situations to occur and is immensely interested in finding out how the human mind and these occurrences are intertwined. Aside from just the paranormal aspect, she also has a deep interest in the cryptid and UFO phenomenon and believes that everything is connected on some level. To track down the answers she seeks, Tanya co-founded Empty Casket Paranormal with Bill Bryan in October of 2020. Welcome to I'm Not Afraid of the Afterlife, Haunted Cemeteries.
We want to mention one quick disclaimer before we get started. Most cemeteries are open from sunset to sunset. Do not enter after dark unless you have permission. It is also illegal to ghost hunt at any time in most cemeteries. If you have a cemetery nearby that you really want to investigate, please get permission first. We do not condone any illegal activities on this podcast.
So we're going to start off simple here, and this might be an obvious answer, but I'm still curious, and I'm going to ask it anyways. So what do you think it is about cemeteries that make them a great place to investigate?
Well, I can't speak for Tanya, but I don't think in general cemeteries are haunted. I think what it is that anytime you try to communicate and you open up that doorway, they can come through and communicate. And cemeteries is some place where believers and non-believers go to communicate. You go to a cemetery to talk to your deceased loved ones. So that line of communication is always open. So while the cemetery itself might not be haunted, by going there and talking, they can come visit that cemetery and visit you and speak to you.
Yeah, and I agree with Bill. I truly believe that it's kind of you're opening yourself up to communication with anything there. And a cemetery is the perfect place to open up a doorway. It's very similar to how a person would communicate using Ouija boards or the Estes method or any type of ghost and spiritual communication. Unless the particular cemetery is founded on, a haunted land of some sort. I think for the most part, I agree with you.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Do you find more activity at older cemeteries than more modern cemeteries?
Well,
That's hard. It's hard to say. It really depends on the day, really. I mean, we could go to a modern cemetery and get tons of activity. We can go to the same cemetery the next day and get nothing. And the same with an old one. We've investigated, most of the cemeteries that we've investigated have a modern section and an older section. And on average, we probably get about the same amount of activity either way. Although we prefer the older section because it looks better.
But I think the majority of cemeteries we have investigated are old cemeteries.
Yeah.
A lot of them date back from what's like maybe the 1700s.
The oldest one that we've been to is late 1600s, actually.
Yeah, late 1600s. So I mean, that's kind of what we do is we find these really older ones.
We just love cemeteries.
Yeah, we
we
do.
go there for walks and whatnot, and the older the better. We love how me especially love just the architecture of the older tombstones and mausoleums and such.
So there are lots of different types of cemeteries: national cemeteries, graveyards, municipal, memorial gardens, etc. Do you have a particular preference as to what you like to investigate? Does one seem to be, trigger more for you, or it doesn't matter? You just go to any of them that you find and have luck?
Yeah, we pretty much go to any of them. I think the only national cemetery either one of us have investigated would be Gettysburg. Oddly enough, didn't get a lot of activity there.
Really?
Have gotten tons of activity in Gettysburg, but not so much in the cemetery.
That's interesting.
Wow.
We prefer our local ones, mainly because it's our roots. I live literally a half a block up the hill from a very old cemetery that houses a lot of the founding fathers of my town and has deep stories of the history of my area. And I've been going there since I was a kid. And it's, to me, my most magical place. I love that cemetery. But we also go to the cemeteries in our valley because I think that's where we're connected the most is our area.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting is cemeteries have been a huge part of both of our lives since childhood. As Tanya said, she grew up near one and goes there all the time. There's the area where I hunt and where I learned how to hike and got my appreciation for nature and doing all that stuff is right behind a cemetery. The property was owned by the cemetery, so we'd actually drive through it every single day, going up there to hike or hunt or just hang out at the cabin. And so being in cemeteries since I was about 2-3 years old.
Wow. So then I guess what are your most favorite cemeteries that you have investigated and why?
For me, it would have to be the 40 Fort Cemetery in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful cemetery. We've done craft shows there in the cemetery that's hosted by one of the local paranormal teams. We've investigated there a couple times, and we've had the most profound experiences of our paranormal career there.
I think for me, it's 40 Fort because that's probably where, like you said, we had the most extreme captures of evidence there. Then Hanover, which is in our area as well, Hanover Green, and then Shawnee Cemetery, which is the one I talked about that's right up the hill from me. They all have produced some type of unique situations for us. And like I said, it's something that's close to us. It's home. They're homely. They have our people.
So,
So
what was the most terrifying experience that you've had at a cemetery, if you've had any at all, or if not terrifying, perhaps then fascinating that you've had at the cemetery?
That would be the same story, fascinating and terrifying. So we were at the 44th Cemetery. We were doing the Estes method. Tanya here was under. It was, she was under, I was there, and then our friend Rachel was there with us. And we were at a monument for a family that the whole family died in a very tragic theater fire. None of the family survived. It was the parents and, was it 3 kids?
Yeah, something like that. 3 kids. 3 or 4 kids.
So we're doing the Estes method there, and we got one of the best Estes methods we've ever had there. Some of the things that came up were, terrible. It was painful. Hold me. I tried to save them. It hurt. I was burned. Like all these things coming through that were very pertinent to what happened. One of the fun parts about this experience, though, was I have a little stuffed rabbit that I put a K2 in. And so we put that next to one of the child's graves. And the child kept asking if he could pick it up.
Is it real?
Is it real? I said, well, what do you want to pick up? He said, the rabbit. And then it named the rabbit, Mr. Mooney.
Oh.
Said it a couple of times. And I'm like, okay, you could pick it up. And it got really excited and yelled, Mooney. So now the rabbit's named Mr. Mooney. So it was absolutely incredible. And then things changed. The whole atmosphere kind of shifted a little bit. And she says, we are the advocates. We've been watching you. We'll bring you up. So my first thought was aliens, naturally. So I immediately looked up. I'm expecting to see some lights in the sky. But we decided at that point, let's cut it out. We had some other friends who were going to be joining us that night, and they were just getting to the cemetery. So I go over, I tap her on the shoulder, and as I'm walking towards her, she goes, a lake. They keep showing me a lake. And when I tapped her on the shoulder, she took the headphones and blindfold off, and she was crying. And she just looked at me and said, I just saw a goddamn gray. So I'll let her tell you what she saw.
So yeah, so in regards to that Estes method, it was going good. And for some reason, I don't know, like, have either one of you ever done the Estes method before?
Yes, but we haven't covered it on an episode. So if you could please explain it for our listeners, that would be good.
So what it is, it's basically a theory that if you take away the majority of your senses, especially sound and sight, that you'll be kind of honing in on the supernatural. We use a spirit box and we connect them to noise canceling headphones, and then I put a blindfold on. So I don't see anything. For the most part, I don't hear anything. You can't hear muffling if there's not a lot of background noise. So from time to time, I can kind of differentiate if someone's speaking, but I can't hear what they're saying. So it's just kind of like mutters. So I'll know if he's saying or if a female's talking. But for the most part, I'm just honing in on a spirit box that's channeling at a super speed through multiple, stations. And the idea is that if a spirit can communicate, they can basically formulate words through the channels. Right.
So sometimes they'll form the words in the static. Other times, if you end up going to a meditative state, they can talk directly to you.
You can see things. I've had, visuals shown to me, such as the lake, which I'll get into. And then there's been times where we're in places where there is absolutely no way you hear any radio frequencies, and I've captured things. I've heard things come through.
Yep.
In regards to this incident, I was sitting at the main tombstone, and Bill and our friend Rachel, they were pretty further away from me. So I can hear them ever so slightly. There was a lot of background noise from the traffic.
This cemetery is right on a main road.
And we were having like a really great Estes method session. And then all of a sudden, it felt like it was the most weirdest thing, I never opened my eyes under the blindfold. There's really no reason for me to do that. But I did. And as I'm opening my eyes under the blindfold, I see the black. And then out of that darkness, I literally see another being coming to my visual. So I see like this creature, and it's black. It's blacker than the background. And then I see its eyes are blacker than itself, which is blacker than the background. And it looked just like how they describe a gray, that round shape, the big eyes. And I can still vaguely hear Bill and Rachel speaking in the background, but this thing comes right up to me and it says, "We are the advocates. We have been watching you. We will bring you up." And they're still asking questions and going on like it's, like a normal thing. And I'm in my head, I said, "Show me the coordinates." For some reason, I figured if I ask the coordinates, it will tell me something. It'll tell me where to go or what to do. And so I kept on saying in my head, "Show me the coordinates, show me the coordinates." And it flashed me visuals of this lake. Never seen it before. And then I get him touching me and I pull off everything. I freak out and I'm bawling my eyes out. That was probably the most realist thing I've ever encountered. I've never really encountered, apparitions or anything, but that was the most terrifying yet awesome experience I've ever had under that. And then later on, after the whole night was over and we come home and I'm already shooken up, we start pulling up pictures of what it possibly could have been. And
so the only word during that entire Estes method that really didn't make sense was the word Erie.
mm-hmm.
And so I put two and two together and pulled up pictures of Lake Erie. And the second picture I pulled up, she said, "Oh my God, that's the lake."
Mm-hmm.
And when we looked into it, Lake Erie is very well known for UFO activity.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I actually don't live all that far from Lake Erie, being in north central Ohio. So that's a cool experience.
Well, what got really freaky is afterwards we were heading back to my house, but we were in separate vehicles, and it's back roads to get to my house. And there's an area next to a lake that we lose all cell service. And so we were on the phone the entire time because just in case something happened, we wanted to be in touch with each other, except for that area when we were going past the lake.
Wow.
But that whole night was filled with paranormal as well. Something that we like to do at Cemeteries. It's something that we created because usually there's times now. I should backtrack. We do a lot of investigations through another group that obtains permission from local areas, historical areas, for us to go in and ghost hunt. Because like you said, we should definitely ask permission, and we never really go into a place without having that permission to investigate. So it was an odd night to begin with because their whole group canceled. There was a cancellation. But they're like, "Listen, these guys can start ghost hunting. We need to go check on someone. We'll come back and we'll investigate with you." So we came up with an idea of we take note cards, and we started this couple cemeteries before this. So this was something that we usually did. We take a note card and we just kind of meditate on a word. And whatever the first word that pops into our head, we write it down on the note card. And then we take the time and we walk around the cemetery and we just kind of allow the forces to pull us somewhere. And we kind of speak out our intentions. So we say, we have this paper here with a word. We're looking for someone to kind of watch over it and hide it for us, keep it hidden for us. And we get pulled to whatever spot we go to, and usually it's a tombstone. And then we kind of remember what's on that stone. So the name, the birth date, what's it look like,
the age.
The age.
Yeah.
And we hide the paper. We fold it up, we hide it. And then the goal is for other people to spend the night trying to either get that name off the card, whatever word we put off the card, trying to find the card, or just getting any information that may lead them there.
Right. And that night we chose a little girl named Caro. She was 5 years old. So we were both drawn to her tomb. So we hid the paper there. Throughout the night, we kept getting the words, "Come find me." We got it in the EVP. We got it through the Estes method from a couple different people who went under the Estes method. "Come find me." We got her name come through a few times. There's an old meeting house on the property that we got access to. So we were doing the human pendulum inside of there. And she was the pendulum. And I kept asking, are you this person or that person? Different tombstones that we had interacted with that night. And it's no. And then I asked, did we leave some paper at your tombstone? Yes. Okay, can you speak really loudly in Tanya's ear and tell her what the word was? And so while we were doing the human pendulum, she was wearing blindfolds and headphones, nothing plugged into the headphones, just had them on. So I ran over and I quickly plugged a SB7 into it. And before I got to ask the question a second time, she just yells, "Potato, potato." And the potato was the word we wrote down. Yeah, her name came through a few times. The word came through a few times. Her age came through once. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah, and it wasn't just captured by us. It was captured by the group that we were with that had no idea any of the information that we already had.
The only time we've had that good of results with that game was at the Conjuring House. But towards the end of the night, we don't want to leave the paper there. So we're like, oh, well, we're going to go get the paper. So our one friend came with us. And then by this point, the curator of the cemetery was there. He walked over with us and he was telling us some of the history of the family, Caro's family. And apparently she was from a very prominent family in the area. So earlier that night, Tanya had made a flower crown when we were just kind of sitting around. And so she'd been wearing it all night. We get to her grave. We thank her for helping us. And we took the paper away, and Tanya put the flower crown on her tombstone. And I suddenly got an image of a little blonde girl in a pink dress picking up the flower crown, putting it on her head with the biggest shit-eating grin you've ever seen. And that hit me really hard. I had to turn around and walk away. I was getting very emotional.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Now, can you explain to our listeners now exactly what the process of what do you mean by a human pendulum?
So the human pendulum, this is something we were introduced to over the summer, and this cemetery was the first time we actually tried it. Basically, you have somebody standing in the middle of a room. They are the pendulum, and a few people standing around them to catch them if they fall. And you just kind of relax, take some deep breaths, try to meditate, and everyone else is asking questions. And then the spirits will push you one way or another. And you ask for, what's going to be a yes, what's going to be a no. In our case, being pushed forward was a yes, pushed backwards was a no. And it's such a bizarre feeling because you're standing there. And we were very skeptical. We watched it happen a few times. And we're like, yeah, but there's so much of your own subconscious into that, and or you're making it up or whatever. But we're standing there and I actually felt a pressure on my chest pushing me back, or on my back pushing me forward. It was bizarre.
Yeah. And that's why I had the headphones and the blindfold on, because I'm so skeptical. I'm like, I don't want anything manipulating my movements. So I figured if I can't hear the questions and I can't see the reactions, then whatever I'm feeling, like I'm not reacting based off of my subconscious. But yeah, I really like that. I really think that's a really cool tool. I still have questions on it, but for the most part,
what's funny is we're finding some of the best things that we do that gets the best results are the cheapest, easiest things. Automatic writing, human pendulum, dowsing rods, regular pendulums. That stuff just seems to work all the time. We have tons of gear. I make it and I sell it, and there are some places where you're better off with the cheap stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I
Which
agree
kind
with
of pains
that.
me to say. 'Cause
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that, but I think that, I mean, when you're telling me that story, I'm naturally going to be skeptical of it too. But when you think of a regular pendulum, everybody says the same thing, right? That, oh, it's your hand manipulating it, or you're moving it with your mind, sort of thing. And then they hold the pendulum and then it moves and they're like, I'm not moving. And then all of a sudden you're a believer. So I can see that.
So it begs the question, is the spirit moving the pendulum, or is the spirit communicating through your subconscious and causing your body to have like little micro movements in your hand that are causing it to move?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
And
Yeah.
we take it a step further, and usually you have like two people try it out in a session. We've done it so where like one of us walks out of the room so we don't hear the questions that are being asked, and then have the next person coming in to have a repeat of the questions.
Right. They come in, they don't know what yes and no are, they don't know what the questions were asked. And it makes it like a single blind study.
Well, that's pretty interesting because I've never heard of human pendulum being done that I'm aware of. So that's why I was curious. This sounds really interesting. That's a very good idea.
Yeah,
And with the blindfold and whatnot, so that way nobody knows. Like
I don't recommend that, but
yeah, if you're going to do the blindfold and headphones, the people you're with, you need to trust, because you can very easily lose your equilibrium.
And I think with me being the most skeptic out of that group with that theory, I got pushed the most. Like there was like a bar or like a railing or something right behind me.
The meeting church was used as a chapel, so there was like a railing right in front of the pulpit.
And I think I went back so far. I hit against it. I'm like, okay. But it's like, it's a weird feeling. It's like a weird sensation. It's like I purposely was trying to ground myself. I'm like, nothing's gonna move me. I am a solid rock. And you feel that movement, and it's hard to explain. It's like a force going through you.
But the way I tried to explain it, it's not so much like you're being pushed. It's like you're being pulled from like if you're going backwards, you're being pulled from the front. It's like they grab the front of your ribs and they pulled you back from there. It's weird. It is a really weird sensation. Wow,
that is interesting. Now, you guys have investigated obviously a lot of cemeteries, but everybody says cemeteries are the last final rest in peace. Why do you think that some cemeteries are not the restful? It's not the last rest in peace. Why do you think that is?
Well, in the case of the 40 Fort Cemetery, back in 72, we had the Agnes flood. It destroyed our valley. And it destroyed that cemetery. It actually lifted up the graves, and there were corpses in the trees and open caskets and stuff. It disturbed.
I believe it was 100. I could be mistaken, but it was around 118 bodies were just washed out of the ground.
Wow.
So a lot of that cemetery got destroyed, and I think there was something else that happened with that. The bodies got misplaced, I believe.
Yeah.
So
some
when
were
they
lost.
so a lot of people got kind of removed from their final resting place. In cases like the Shawnee, before it was actually a cemetery, that was Native Americans were up there. They took a group, they invaded the valley, and they took a group of prisoners up there. Same with the Hanover Green.
Hanover Green, there was an actual battle between colonists and Indians on the property.
So I think in terms of, and that kind of goes back to that theory, like, is, are cemeteries actually haunted, or is there something else at play? In cases like those where you have other historical events happening, I can understand there being something else there. Now, in case with our Shawnee Cemetery, we feel personally that there's something more of a nature spirit.
Yeah.
Something not so much a human spirit there, but something that kind of lingers in the background. To go up there, and this is before the Historical Society took it over. It was actually kind of abandoned for many years. And when I was going up there, it was like a whole new world. It was a magical little world that no one knew about. And you felt something there. You felt something unnatural lurking around. And it wasn't like bad. It just felt different, unworldly. And that's the sensation Bill got when he first got there. It's like there's something that lurks in the perimeters.
I'll never forget the first time she brought me up there. We park and we get out and we're just going to go for a walk. And we walked to maybe 20, 30 feet. And I just stopped. She goes, what? And I said, right back there, just inside the wood line, there's a nature spirit just kind of sitting there watching us, watching what we're going to do. And every time we've been up there, it's been standing right at the wood line, watching us. It keeps an eye on the place. It keeps an eye on the woods behind it.
Wow. Like an elemental kind of spirit, nature spirit, just watching over.
There's a cemetery down maybe a few miles down at the end of the town. And they kind of, I don't want to say they connect, but the tree lines, the forest will connect to there. So if you were to walk from that cemetery, you eventually find your way up that side of the mountain. And we felt that sensation there. And back in that cemetery, there's this set of stairs that go to a place that I have no idea what it is.
It's this like really creepy, like stone stairway that just goes right up the mountain.
And it leads to this abandoned area, which I don't know if it was mine related because I live in a mining town, or if it could have been fairgrounds of some sort. But as a kid, I used to sneak up there. It was private property. So I used to sneak up there with my friend and we would play, and you would always hear drumming, like Native American drumming. So when we went up there and we walked around and we kind of went up the stairs a little bit, you can still hear that. You can still hear that faint drumming. And what's cool is that my area has sightings of Bigfoots and things like that in those mountains, in those areas. So, like I said, I think everything's connected. So there's a reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting when you really start getting down to looking at these stuff, and it seems like it's a one-off, but then one thing happens, another thing happens, another thing happens, and they don't seem related, almost like a crime scene when a bunch of different things happen, and then you're like, oh, these are actually connected to one person or one event or one location.
Of course, yeah. And of course it has to do with your intentions too. Like think about it. There's some places where like really historical people are buried. I believe Jim Morrison in France, I think he's buried there in France, in Paris.
Yep.
They have reports of his ghost always being seen because people go there consistently to seek out that gravestone. The Conjuring House we brought up, the famous Bathsheba.
Yeah, we were there in July, and naturally with our love of cemeteries and it being in Rhode Island, we stopped at one cemetery to see Lovecraft's grave, H.P. Lovecraft.
By the way, that cemetery is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. And there in Harrisville, Rhode Island, where the Conjuring House is, we stopped in their little cemetery and went to the location of Bathsheba's grave. The headstone's not there anymore
because people knock it down and destroy it.
Yeah, and then they desecrated it, and so they just took the tombstone away. But we went there and we left an offering of flowers there, and kind of talked to her a little bit and apologized on behalf of the people who did the desecration for that and how that was wrong, and told her that we'd be going to the house on Round Top Road, and that if she wanted to come visit us and tell us her story, we would do everything we can to get her story out there. So we went and we investigated the Conjuring House and got nothing with Bathsheba. The following weekend, I was hosting an event there for 2 nights in a row. On the second night, there was a psychic there. And so we're down in the basement doing the Access method. And I get, the other host was up on the second floor, and she, on the walkie-talkie says, "Hey, Bill, just to let you know, we keep getting your name through here." and they were in a bedroom that I always felt very uncomfortable and actually physical pain in. The middle bedroom up there just always caused me some pain right here in my chest, around my clavicle, and or I got a really heavy feeling. I didn't like being in that room. But so I'm down in the basement, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to ask the question that I don't want to ask: who's trying to get a hold of me? And the guy under the SS method says, a friend. I said, okay, what friends do I have here? And he takes the headphones off and he looks and he goes, I don't know what question you just asked, but I swear to God, it just said Bathsheba. And then the psychic who was down there with us, she started channeling Bathsheba, and we got her full story, that she was a midwife, and a damn good one. And so there's a room in the Conjuring house called the birthing room, because anyone in that town, they would go to that house to have their baby. And there was multiple midwives, and Bathsheba was the one who was always called when it was bad. When there was danger to the mother or the child, because she was the best. But being what it was, the medical technology at the time, she wasn't able to save everybody. She did her best, and that's what she was saying through the psychic, that she did her best. She tried to save them, and the town people eventually started hating me because of it, and told lies and rumors and all this. And so that's the story that we got from Bathsheba herself on what her story was.
Interesting.
Wow.
Obviously, when investigating a cemetery, it takes place outside, which, we encounter sometimes on ghost hunts, but not a lot. A lot of times we investigate and there's inside, so there's some shielding from, traffic and weather conditions and wind and everything like that. So how do you approach your investigations with it being outside and taking into consideration all those elements? What's your process? How do you account for weather elements and traffic and other noises?
Well, if it's wet, there's certain pieces of equipment we won't bring with us, just because we don't want the equipment to get damaged. We typically don't even try for EVPs. Sometimes we will if we think it's quiet enough, but generally we go in there assuming that we're not going to try for EVPs. Sometimes we get them anyway, but
we're basically from videotaping. We weren't even intentionally trying to get them. We were just videotaping the session.
And I typically have a recorder on the entire session just to capture everything, so when we can go back and listen to, and we know what we did throughout the night. But we do a lot of SS method, dowsing rods, things that the weathers and the wind generally aren't going to bother too much. Now, dowsing rods, the wind can, but if you can find a little spot that's a little secluded with some trees or bushes or something, you can get an area where you can do that. And then some of these, especially around here, a lot of the larger cemeteries have old meeting houses or chapels or stuff on the property, and sometimes we can get access to those.
Yeah, like the Hanover Green one, that one has really interesting history. And the meeting house itself, there's been sightings of shadow figures. It has two stories, so people see things in the balconies. And when we were there, we were capturing footsteps. It sounded like people were running around. And I believe we saw, I vaguely saw, my son saw someone kind of like bending over in the window, like as if they're like moving something around. And then they also have a caretaker's house, which there's been reports that people have met the caretaker, not even knowing that he was an apparition. One of the stories was a girl was going up there, I think around Christmas Eve, something like that. Yep. And her car got stuck in the snow there. And this gentleman came out and helped her push her car out. And I guess when she came back a couple weeks later, was talking to him.
I think she turned around to thank him, and he was gone.
He was gone. Yeah.
And there was no footprints other than hers. And then she came up later and asking about it. And the current caretaker told her that, oh yeah, I can't remember his name. That's so and so. Yeah, he's a caretaker here. He passed away so many years ago, but he's still around and helps out.
Yeah, and people still see him walking around in the house and stuff like that.
The coolest thing about that cemetery, well, the cemetery itself is just awesome. They got a really old section where they have Revolutionary War soldiers. There's a Jewish section, which is very different than the Christian section. But we ended up, again, Estes method, that's our bread and butter. We do that all the time. We were doing that. She was under, and we started getting this really feisty woman came through. We kind of got the sense that she was an older woman,
Sassy.
very sassy, very fiery. But twice she said the name of our group, Empty Casket Paranormal. And so because she said that twice, we actually named the ghost in our logo Dolly, which was the name that she told us was hers.
Now, mind you, I think at the time when I was under, Bill was talking to some of like the people that were in our group, people we don't even know. And we were handing them a card, right? You were taking the card out. And that's when I said, and I didn't even know any of this was happening. At the time you had taken out the card handing, that's when I said empty casket. And I laughed because I always joke. I'm like, oh, I wish they would say our name. Wouldn't that be really cool? Get an EVP, say our paranormal group's name. And then I start laughing because I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I just heard them say empty casket paranormal. And they said it twice. So
yeah.
But yeah, like we like the Estes method. We like dowsing rods. They work in these situations. And like our silly experiments, like with the card and everything, we try to get very creative. Sometimes I will just go up by myself and try doing the card game and seeing if Bill can find it.
Yeah, I think the first time we tried that was because I was going to get a chance to investigate a cemetery, but she had to work that night. So she went up the day before and with a picture, right?
Yeah, picture.
So she had a picture at a tombstone. And so we were trying to, find out what the picture, well, I knew what the picture was, trying to find out what the name of the tombstone was, or if we could use dowsing rods to get pointed towards it. We ended up not finding it through the dowsing rods. We got from our starting point, we started working towards it. We were going in the general right direction, but we could hit a point where we just started going in circles.
Mm-hmm. And what else do we use up there? We use like cat balls because they work.
Yeah.
Cat balls are great. They're cheap.
Yeah.
They don't really get affected too much by the wind.
No, for the most part.
Yeah.
Unless it's a big gust. But
yeah, unless it's a big gust, they're not going to get really bothered by the wind.
Yeah. REM pods we use a lot in cemeteries. Put them on the tombstone or on a monument.
Mm-hmm.
K2s. Well, you got to be careful with the K2s because some of the monuments have a lot of granite. Granite has a lot of quartz in it, and that can set off a K2.
I actually did not know that. So, what would you consider the best piece of evidence that you've captured at one of the cemeteries?
That's a tough one.
I would definitely say our Estes methods, but I think during that one that we talked about where I saw the advocates, I think right as we were setting up, I think that's where it happened. We got a pretty good clear EVP, unintentional, of "come find me."
Yeah, and
that was a good one.
And that phrase actually came up several times throughout the night because we obviously we didn't know about it at the time. We didn't find out about it until a week later.
Yeah,
when we were rewatching the video.
No, we saw it that night because remember I said I need to see this. I need to see what happened. I need to go over it.
Well, either way, it was after the investigation that we found that. But during the Estes method, she said, "Come find me" twice, and then one of our friends in the meeting hall said it.
Yeah, I don't usually hear EVPs. I'm like it doesn't sound.
It's funny when we go through our evidence. I go through most of it, and I'll pick out where I think I hear something, and I'll try to clean it up. And I always play it for her to see if she hears anything, because she's very, very skeptical of EVPs. And most of the time she goes, I hear there's something where I can't make it out. But this time, like, she freaked out. She's like, "Oh my God, there's an EVP there." And I missed that one.
But I think, like, in terms of evidence, it's not so much what we captured, it's
what
the
we
experience
felt and what we experienced. Yeah.
That that is a huge difference between investigating the cemeteries and like other places, is that usually when we investigate cemeteries, there's a different sensation. Like it's not, it's not the evidence, it's not capturing an EVP, it's just kind of connecting. You're immersed into a different time, I guess.
And I didn't really think about this until you asked that question, and we're sitting here thinking through it. When we're investigating a cemetery, we're not doing much to capture evidence. We're there more for the experience. Whereas if we're in a building, we want to capture the evidence. I mean, we want the experience too, but we're there for evidence. In a cemetery, our mindset's just different going into it. I don't know if that's a subconscious thing because it's final resting place and we're just trying to be more respectful, or if it's because it's outside and it's harder to get that evidence. But yeah.
And something that's really cool, like, like I said before, we kind of investigate with another group that gets the permission to go in there. And what they like to do is they split people off into different groups. And so at the end of the night, when we all come together, we collaborate. What'd you get? What do we get? And you find out that everyone gets a story. Some people get a name, and some people get a date, or you get pieces of a story from something. And what's great is usually they have historians right there on site, or the caretakers, and they can kind of give us, immediate information like, oh yeah, that happened, or that person did exist, or they're related to this person, or something like that. That happens a lot in the cemeteries, where we get, a correlating story told in pieces, basically.
Oh, that's really interesting. That is really cool.
Is there any pieces of evidence you have on hand that you'd like to share? If not, you can send it to me and I can add it into the episode later.
But on our YouTube channel, Empty Casket Paranormal, we put all of our raw files on there. So if anybody wants to go and check it out yourself and see if you can find anything, you're more than welcome to. So everything from the 44's up there, everything from Hanover Green is there, Shawnee Cemetery, and then all of our other investigations. Most of our other investigations. We always get permission from the owners to be able to post it. And there's been a few owners where they're like, yeah, we'd rather you didn't do that. Like, okay, we won't post it then.
Oh, okay.
And there's been a couple times when we kind of just gone a spur of the moment ghost hunt, and we found some really cool. How's that one up in
the Hickory Run?
Hickory
so
Run.
There's a state park about 45 minutes from us, Hickory Run State Park. And there used to be a small village in the middle of it, and it was destroyed by a flood in the mid 1800s. But their cemetery is still there. So we went down there,
and no one knows of it.
Very few people know of it. So we were able to find it. And it's funny, it's right off the main road, but it's like this weird little path you got to take that's really hard to find. So we got up there, and it's I think the newest grave was 1860 something. So we did an EVP session up there. I don't remember getting anything on the EVPs, but it was such a different atmosphere than any cemetery we've been in before, because it was mostly untouched for the last 100 some years. Very few people ever visited it. And so we went up there, and it was so peaceful and just so welcoming. We ended up just sitting under this big old gnarled oak tree and just sat there for a good, half hour, 45 minutes. Yeah, that was a really fun place to be.
Wow, that is amazing. I'd like to visit some of these too, but well, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about that we have not covered tonight?
In terms of cemeteries,
I think for the most part, you should, if you are going to be investigating cemeteries, you should always go in there with positive intentions. There should be no conjuring up anything. You should not be going in there with anything but the utmost respect for the people that dwell there. These were once living people, and that is their final resting place. So you should always be respectful of those grounds. Those are sacred grounds, and it's sacred to all nationalities. That's why the Native Americans hold their grounds very sacred. That's where you lay your loved ones. So when you go in there, you don't desecrate graves. You don't go in there for the fun of it. You go in there for, learning new things, trying to find some answers, and always saying thank you, and, being disrespectful. And
Yeah, and to add on to that, not just respectful to the spirits, but respectful to the living. I mean, people still go to cemeteries to see their loved ones, to talk to their loved ones, and they don't want to show up and find any kind of weird ritualistic stuff there, or a broken tombstone, or anything like that. And if you do go to a cemetery, try to keep your voice down, because you don't know who's around, who's trying to have a peaceful moment with, their deceased parents or sibling or grandparents, or whoever. So yeah, respect goes a long way with cemeteries.
And we always think about keeping your intentions as pure as can be, going in there,
And that's just good advice
yeah.
across the board, regardless of where you're investigating.
And, closing yourself out. When you're done, say thank you for your time. Thank you for your stories. But, what happens here stays here. And, you cannot follow us home. You can't come back with us. And then, when you do come home, to de-cleanse yourself.
We really believe that, using a Ouija board and doing an EVP session, Estes method, dowsing rods, pendulums,
the whole shebang.
Even just going to a cemetery to talk to your deceased loved ones, all of it, it's the same thing. You're opening that door of communication. You just got to know, you got to close it right. You say thank you, you say goodbye, you close that out. It's the same doorway that you're opening no matter what you do. So you just got to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is fantastic advice for our listeners. So I know you mentioned you had Empty Casket Paranormal YouTube page. What other social media sites do you have out there, or contact information that our listeners might be aware of if they are interested in checking you out, getting a hold of you, so on and so forth?
So we have a website, emptycasketparanormal.com. We have links to everything there. You can find us on YouTube, as I said, Empty Casket Paranormal, Facebook, Instagram, both of which at Empty Casket Paranormal. If you're interested in any of the ghost hunting equipment I make, you could check out my Etsy page. It's Empty Casket Equipment, because I couldn't write out paranormal. It was one letter too long. And then, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're co-founders of Get Haunted, which is a paranormal network for individuals, teams, location owners, people who make gear, people who are just interested in the paranormal. So you can find our website there, gethaunted.com. The website still needs some updating. But primarily, you can find us on Facebook there. There's Get Haunted, which is our public Facebook page. And then we have a private page for all the members. That's Get Haunted Network group page. So feel free to, request to join. We let everyone in. And as long as you are respectful to each other and you're helpful and everyone gets along, then it's going to be a great community where we can kind of build up and have everybody help each other out, and just make it a really cohesive paranormal community.
And it's a great way to find new cemeteries to go walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great site. I mean, I love Get Haunted. I'm so glad I joined. It's wonderful. I met a lot of nice.
I mean, that's why we're doing this right here. Because of our connection. This is exactly what we want.
This is a prime example of what Get Haunted's for. You have this podcast. You were looking for people to be on the podcast, post it on Get Haunted, and you got people. And other podcasters have done the same thing. We have people looking to get into locations, individuals who are trying to get in the teams, people who are new to ghost hunting, who looking to learn. And unfortunately, a lot of the paranormal community is really closed off. They don't want to teach. They don't want to bring on new people. They don't want to share their secrets. Well, we're the opposite of that. Let's put everything out there. Let's bring everybody together. Let's work together so everybody learns and grows. And that's the only way for the whole community to continue moving forward.
And that's how you learn of new places to go and new things and new stories.
Yep.
Yes, a great network. It really is. So I thank you guys. And Rob.
And so Jennifer and I, and this is going to be the first time our listeners hear about this because we haven't posted about it yet, but Jennifer and I are in the process of starting, as of 2022, our own paranormal team off of the podcast. So Jennifer and I will be taking on Not Afraid Paranormal. And I know we've been talking about meeting up with you guys. I want to go to that cemetery. You guys are not that far from me at all in Pennsylvania, that cemetery. And then the Conjuring House and whatever else. We're looking forward to teaming up with you guys.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah,
And we want to come
absolutely.
around your way too, because of all the fun things we can go.
Yep.
Well, I'm down south at Myrtle Beach, so you can come down here.
There's a lot down south.
Really, I know that I've had little difficulty finding, locations, especially they'll let you come in. But Myrtle Beach don't seem to have many. I'm sorry?
The trick there is finding people who will let you in.
Yeah.
Yes,
You can always find places, but getting in is the hard part.
exactly.
And Haunted can fix that.
Good deal. Well, I'll get with you and Rob then and see what we can do. We can
Definitely.
get everybody down here too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now Get Haunted is mostly Northeast US. And that's just because that's where
The
most of
majority
us
of
are
us
right
are.
now. But we have every intention on going nationwide.
Perfect. Yeah, I know. I've been talking to Rob about that too. So awesome.
Well, Tanya and Bill, thank you so much for being here with Empty Casket Paranormal on our podcast. We've enjoyed having you. Your stories were fantastic. I'm looking forward to listening to that evidence and including it in the episode here. It'll be the first time we've ever included live evidence in here, so no pressure, but that's super exciting. And we thank you very much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. This
It
has
was
been fun.
fun. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Y'all have a good night.
You're
You
welcome.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite streaming service. I'm Sydney Miller, and this was